Hey, I'm the proof when I'm in the booth, spitting on the mic. Anti-vax, Putin hates all of them blacks. Putin is a bad racist. Put him in the ground, white or brown. And I'm in plain old town. And you know you just got found. I'm a pimp on a blimp. Eat lots of steak and shrimp. No, you can't stop my shine. I'm number 99. And you know I grind and shine. And you know I do it all the time. One more time, I'm teaching class. This is your whole pass. Zelensky is a VIP. Ukraine and I go insane. Put a bullet in Putin's brain. You know that is the plan. I'm a Zelensky stan. I love you, Vladimir Zelensky. You are so smart. What's that smell? Did somebody fart? No, what can you say? Vaccinate me straight or gay. I love you, and I love to whine and grind all the time. And you got that sanitizer. And you know I got that Pfizer. You know I stick it in my vein. Put a bullet in Putin's brain. Do it for the Ukraine. Before I go insane, let me antibacterial on my body. At the party, sipping Bacardi. You know the flow. And I am a pimp. Cause I am on the brim. Eating lots of steak and shrimp. One more time, I'm 99. And you know I grind and shine. Gas price is way too high. Vladimir Putin needs to die. Gas price is way too high. Vladimir needs to die. I'm the truth in the booth. Take my picture. I'm a winner. I'ma eat you for dinner. Okay.
You want to go to?
I just want to.
Hey, real talk. I'm gonna tell you this right now. That's the kind of performance that'll get your ass on the Supreme Court. And Republicans ain't gonna be mad about you at all. You know what I'm saying? That's the kind of shit you need to do at a Supreme Court nomination confirmation hearing, and you pass through that motherfucker with flying colors, man. Real talk. But yo, man, what's going on with everybody, y'all? This is Mr. Spann, and this is the Spann Report, and this is episode number 357 of the Spann Report. We live here on a Sunday night. And yo, man, we gonna talk some shit tonight, man. We gonna talk some shit. But of course, before we do that, I gotta remind you guys how to get in touch with us over here at the Spann Report Podcast. Let your voice be heard. Go ahead and hit us up at the hotline at area code 313-288-0485. That's area code 313-288-0485. Leave us those voicemail messages, and of course, those messages will get replied to here live on the show, responded to in kind. You can also email us here at feedback@thespannreport.com. That's feedback@thespannreport.com. Go ahead, leave us those emails, and of course, those emails will get read here, replied to here live as well. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram. My name on both of those platforms is Mr._Spann. So go ahead, follow me there. Chop it up with your man Spann throughout the week. Also, hit us up on our iTunes and or Stitcher Radio with a 5-star review. Those 5-star reviews are the ones that get read here live in the show. We really appreciate everybody who goes about the business of doing that. Doesn't cost you a dime, just a couple minutes of your time to let everybody know why you're rocking with us over here at the Spann Report Podcast Network, man. Real talk. Also, hit up our website, man. Go there, watch replays of the show. You can donate to the show as often as you like, as much as you like. And, of course, we really do appreciate every dime over here at the Spann Report Podcast Network to help us continue to do this the way in which we do this. Shout out to our Patreon patrons. The Patreon patrons are the ones who allow for us to do this show here live for you on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter. Yeah, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. Yeah, that's how we do that. So our Patreon patrons are the golden circle of the Spann Report Podcast Network, man. They really put down for us, and I appreciate them immensely. And yeah, I owe you guys a bunch of explanations for a lot of shit. But yeah, man, we really do appreciate our folks over there at Patreon who help, continue to help this ball continue to roll, man. Real talk. But yo, man, first things first, I feel like I got some confessions to make and shit. So I did an episode last week, episode 356. That episode has yet to be published. And the reason why that episode has yet to be published is because your man Spann came down with the COVID. Yeah, man, I did. Me and my wife both were suffering from COVID-19, man. I've been at home. I've been quarantining for almost like a week and a half, I want to say. I've been off of work since like before. Well, I was already scheduled to be off of work for like St. Patrick's Day and shit. But that weekend, my wife was feeling quite sick. And, you know, when, I started treating, she started feeling really bad and stuff. And she took a COVID test initially, and that test didn't come back positive at first, but like she got, kind of progressively worse. And then she took a second one, and that second one was like, yo, yeah, COVID. And so when she tested positive for COVID, because I'm around my wife, I took, a test, and the initial test came back negative, and then I took another one, and that boy came back positive as well. And so, I called the job, told the job what was going on. And they said, well, yeah, man, sit your ass down until about the 26th, right? They didn't want me to come in. They was like, nah, you're going to quarantine till about the 26th, and we're going to keep track of your symptoms and things like that, but you can't come back to work until at least the 26th. And so, and at first I wasn't really feeling, much of anything, but after about a day or two, I started getting a bit congested, started getting headaches, started getting like body chills and stuff. It really felt like like when I got the second shot, when I got vaccinated, it felt like that second shot. Now the second shot like kind of put me on my ass a little bit, but like it only lasted like 12 hours. This lasted the whole week. You know what I'm saying? This lasted the entire week. And so I've been at home pretty much taking like Theraflu and Sudafed, and me and my wife made hot toddies and shit, and we just like kind of caring for each other and shit, right? And so I didn't really have a whole hell of a lot of energy to just kind of get to my computer and stuff. I swear, man, like I didn't touch my computer. I didn't do a whole hell of a lot outside of like lay my ass in bed, man, and get up and watch a little bit of TV. I might tweet a little bit. I might Facebook a little bit, but I wasn't doing a whole hell of a lot. And I didn't announce it on social media or anything like that. I just didn't feel the need to. But yeah, we've been like kind of quarantined. I haven't been to work in, like I said, a week and a half and shit. I've just been at home. And so I'm scheduled to go back to work tomorrow. And, it's just like as we were dealing with that, like I just never got around to publishing episode 356. So episode 356 will go out tonight, and it will go out tonight along with episode 357. So like I said to you guys on episode 356, man, I know like this year I haven't really been producing as many podcasts as I want to. I haven't been as consistent as I would like to be. And most of that was contributed by my work schedule, but then COVID came and finally touched your boy. I feel like, real talk, after 2.5 years of this pandemic shit, I was like, yo, man, I guess it was about time it got to a nigga, right? And so it did. And luckily, I feel like, if I had not been vaxxed, if I had not been boosted, who knows that like how bad the symptoms could have been had I not been vaxxed and boosted and everything else. And same with my wife and whatnot. So I feel like we got lucky. I feel like also that we did the proper precautions in order to not catch the COVID. But yo, man, this COVID thing is real and it's out here. And like as much as people are acting as though the COVID-19 thing is over, it's still out here, man. It's still out here. It's affecting people. I know some folks were. They're talking as though. They're talking as though it's over, right? Like I know some folks were like, yo, man, so I guess we're not tracking how many people are dying anymore. We're not tracking how many cases we have anymore. You don't see that shit all over the news and stuff. And I think by and large, a lot of like the biggest reason for that is because people are just ready to move on. They're like, yo, man, you get vaxxed, you get boosted, you do what you're supposed to do. And then like you still got shit to do. Life can't stop anymore. And I think that's where we're at with it. But just grateful that me and my wife both were vaxxed and boosted and able to kind of come through this with like, what essentially was like kind of a mild flu for us, right? It was sort of like a mild flu. And so, my wife is dealing with some other symptoms that, I haven't necessarily had to deal with. Like, her taste for food is a little bit different. She lost her sense of smell for a little bit. And I think my appetite hasn't been as big as it normally is, but I still eat. Your man Spann still gets down on the plate. But yeah, man, it's been an interesting week to say the least. And so I apologize for not having episode 356 out for you guys, but like I said, that will be coming out tonight along with this episode. And one of the things that I talked about on episode 356 was that because of the way that I work, I want to be more prolific in how we are able to produce content here. I want to be able to get you guys more episodes, but not some bullshit episodes. And one of the reasons why I want to do that is because, man, I be having things I want to talk about, but like the way in which I've structured the show over the last few years has been, okay, I got these segments. I got to put these in the segments and all these other things. But one of the things I learned about podcasting years ago was that your show is whatever the fuck you make it, and you can format it however the fuck you want. There are no real rules to this shit. You can make it however you want. And so tonight, I only got really one topic that I kind of want to talk about. I kind of want to do like a deep dive sort of thing. And I think I'm going to do more of these like deep dive sort of episodes where we talk about one thing and we really examine that one thing and why this thing is a thing. And so that's what we're going to do tonight. I don't have like proud to be an American, although this could probably be a proud to be an American, story. It could also probably be in a news story because it's been in the news. It could be a Blue Blazer story because it's crazy too. It could be all of these things, right? And so we're going to talk a bit about what's been going on with Leah Thomas, the transgender collegiate women's swimmer, right? And so we're going to talk about that tonight. But yeah, man, I got a random thought. Actually, no. I'm gonna save that. I had a conversation with another podcast buddy of mine, and we're gonna talk about that a little bit later this week. So yeah, you guys might get 2 shows this week because of how I'm trying to like reformat how we do the Spann Report here. But yeah, I had an experience this week having to do with gym shoes, sneakers, and I want to rant about it. And I got somebody that is a bit more knowledgeable about this sort of thing than I am, because I feel like I'm aging out of the whole sneakerhead sort of shit. Your man Spann is frustrated with these, like the sneakerhead culture. I'm starting to hate you niggas, bro. And so yeah, man, I got a real good podcast homie that's gonna come through and we gonna chop it up, and yeah, we gonna talk about that. So I'm not gonna even go into that. That's not gonna be my random thought this week. You guys will hear about that. That's gonna be a whole episode in and of itself. So yeah, man. Yeah, but like, yeah, I said we gonna just kind of just jump into this, right? This is all new, so your man Spann freestyling up here right now. I don't have my shit structured in the way in which I have it structured normally, but yo, we gonna talk about this Leah Thomas thing, right? And so one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about Leah Thomas tonight was as of course, things kind of come up on social media, and sometimes social media lends to what gets talked about on the news and everything else. But sometimes there are stories that tend to get manufactured, so to speak, right? There are stories that they're manufactured and then they're astroturfed on social media, meaning they're artificially motherfucking pumped up, and then the news then kind of feeds into what they're talking about on social media, how they're talking about it on social media. And then sometimes the news will frame it a certain way, right? And so I noticed over the course of the last couple of weeks that because the NCAA swimming championships were happening, and Leah Thomas had the temerity, the unmitigated gall, to actually win an event at the women's national championships. And Leah Thomas is a transgender woman. Yeah. And hold on a second. I got the homie Jack, and he's like, I want to join. Hey man, it's an open invitation. I'll get in touch with you, brother. Like after I get off of the mic here tonight. But yeah, you could definitely be a part of this conversation because I know you a sneakerhead, my dude. So yeah, you could definitely be a part of that conversation. I'll hit you up with the details and whatnot when we get that down. But for sure, we gonna rap because this some bullshit I came across this last weekend, man. For real, for real. But yeah, so Leah Thomas, the transgender collegiate swimmer, has been like the talk of like social media like for the past 2 weeks or so, right? And so one of the things that I thought was very interesting about it was how easily the story just kind of blew up, right? And how predictable most of the people most of the reactions to the story about Leah Thomas were. Like the reactions were very much typical and predictable. And the reasons why it was predictable and all of those things is because the way in which the story is framed. So the story is framed that Leah Thomas was a man who was a swimmer at the collegiate level, who transitioned into a woman. He was mediocre as a male swimmer, who I think they said he was ranked number like 462, 463 as a male in the collegiate swimming rankings and stuff like that. Now he went from being ranked 462 to being the number one ranked female swimmer in the nation, right? So like off top, he's got a tremendous advantage because he was born a man, he was born a male, and he's able to like just shatter all of these records and everything else, right? And so by and large, people just kind of recognize like, yo, man, there's a bit of an advantage there. Like there's an unfair thing going on here where you got this dude competing against these women and he's got this unfair advantage, and like it's taking away a spot from a woman. It's taking away an opportunity from a female athlete who would otherwise have this spot had it not been taken away from them by this person who's interloping in the female sports apparatus and everything else, right? And so one of the things that I've started to notice over the course of the time that I've been doing this podcast, man, I've been podcasting for a little while now. It'll be like, shit, I've been podcasting a decade now. It's crazy. But one of the things about doing this podcast and observing media in the way in which I do so that I could talk about that shit when we're on the podcast is that you start to notice patterns and stuff, right? And I started noticing a pattern in how we talk about these certain subjects and when these subjects come about, when these subjects are amplified so that we can get amped about them and then make decisions about whether or not this is right or wrong, and then whether or not we should start coming up with laws and legislation to police this thing that could be right or wrong, however we lean on the spectrum and shit, right? And so Leah Thomas won a national championship at these I believe this was it was the women's national championships. She actually won an event. She won an event at the women's national championships, and there was more than one event at this national championships though. But the only thing that we heard was Leah won one of the events, right? We heard that she won one of the events, and she won it by like 1.5 seconds or so, right? And instantly folks were like, yo, it's because she had this, this inherent physical advantage for being born a male. But one of the things that gets lost in the sauce is she hasn't broken any swimming records of any sort, right? Like she hasn't broken any like world records. She hasn't broken any Olympic records. She hasn't broken any collegiate records. None of these things, right? And she's also lost a few matches. She's lost a few, swim meets. She came, as a matter of fact, in her very last race as a collegiate swimmer, she came in, I believe, 8th place. We get this story here. This comes out of ESPN. Leah Thomas finished 8th in a 100-yard freestyle final. She said, Penn swimmer Leah Thomas' collegiate swimming career ended with an 8th place finish in the 100-yard freestyle on Saturday. Thomas posted a time of 48.18 seconds, 0.81 seconds slower than her qualifying time. Virginia freshman Gretchen Walsh finished first with 46.05 seconds to win her first individual NCAA championship. Now, again, you hear national championship, you thinking, yo, this person has won the entire thing. No, they have multiple national champions for certain events and things. So she's competing for national championships in all of these different events. Says Yale junior Isaac Hennick finished with a career best 47.32 seconds for a fifth place. With a career best 47.32 seconds to tie for fifth place. Hennick is a transgender man and is eligible to compete in the women's category because he hasn't begun hormone therapy. Walsh started the race slow, but gained steam over the final 50 to pass University of Alabama senior Morgan Scott. Wait a second. What are they talking about here? Okay. Walsh started the race slow, but gained steam over the final 50 to pass University of Alabama senior Morgan Scott. Thomas was in 8th after the first 50, and Hennick was in 5th, which is why they were both ultimately finished. Now, here's the thing. No one's talking about Isaac Hennick. Isaac Hennick didn't win anything. This is the reason why they're not talking about Isaac Henning. The reason why they're talking about Leah Thomas is because Leah Thomas actually had the temerity to win an event. It says Thomas and Hennig both came into the 100 freestyle as the 4th and 8th seeds, respectively. They both finished their qualifying heats in 2nd place. The last time they squared off was in February at the Ivy League Championships. Thomas got off to the better of Hennig there, taking home the conference title in Atlanta. Hennig avenged that loss. On the podium after the award ceremony, Thomas and Hennig posed for a photo afterwards and embraced in celebration. Both swimmers wrote, "Let trans kids play" on their arms for the race. So, yeah, this part here wasn't exactly amplified in the media that, like, yo, they came in 4th and 8th place at this meet in the national championships. That wasn't amplified, right? And so, again, like, I want to bring this into this. I want to bring our attention to the fact that the reasons why these stories are coming up, right? 2022 is an election year, okay? We're going to be voting this year, y'all. Like, I know a lot of folks like are only talking about voting when it comes to the presidential elections. We tend to miss the midterms and shit, and to the Democrats' detriment, a lot of midterm, in the midterm elections, a lot of Democratic voters, they tend to fall off because there's not that one big thing on the ticket. If like one of the things that Republicans tend to do is that they're pretty consistent about voting, and they're very disciplined and falling in line when it comes to who they're going to vote for and why they're going to vote for them. A lot of them are very much single-minded, one-issue voters a lot of times, right? And where with the Democratic, coalition, there's like a caucus sort of a situation where everybody's got their pet issues and things like that. And sometimes, you'll have, based on like on principle, people like, well, shit, he ain't talking about healthcare, like Medicare for, oh, well, fuck that nigga then. I ain't voting. Fuck that. You know what I'm saying? He ain't talking about like canceling student loans, man. Fuck that nigga, man. I ain't voting for that nigga. Like, we have those things. And so he might, you might have a candidate who, aligns with you 89-90% of the time, and folks just ain't trying to hear because there's that one thing that they ain't really fucking with, or there's that one thing that that candidate isn't talking about, and they're just not really they're not really like for sticking through that, right? And so because this is a voting year, because this is a midterm election year, what you're going to see is a lot of cultural war issues start sprouting up all over America, right? And the reason why I say this comes up because it's an election year is because how many of you guys remember that in 2016, the big issue that a lot of people were talking about, that a lot of conservatives were trumpeting, was the transgender bathroom bills? Y'all remember that? Yeah. Yeah. Y'all remember that? They were talking about the use of bathrooms and being able to go into the bathroom of the gender that you identify with, right? They talked about a lot about that in 2015, 2016. That was a real big issue. And we haven't heard much at all about that since then, right? When's the last time you heard anybody talking about that damn bathroom? I haven't heard a whole lot of people talking about that bathroom. You just haven't. Right? Because the reason why they amplified that message then was because they were trying to amplify the people who were bigoted towards transgender people. And I want to make this clear, man. When we say bigoted, oftentimes we're including people who just aren't knowledgeable about it and aren't necessarily trying to be knowledgeable about it either. And so when you're not trying to be knowledgeable about it and you're actively participating in discriminatory acts towards a group that you're not even trying to acknowledge and you're not trying to be knowledgeable about, sometimes it comes across as you being a bigot. That's the nature of it. And I know sometimes they're resentful of these terms. They're resentful of being called a bigot. They're resentful of being called transphobic and all these other things. But it's like, yo, man, you got to call a spade sometimes. And I know oftentimes on this show, I have talked about issues relating to the LGBTQ community. I'm not a part of the LGBTQ community, but I recognize that they're dealing with issues that could at some point down the line affect me, if it hasn't already affected me in some sort of way, right? As a black man in America, I understand that, like, yo, sometimes discrimination is discrimination. It may come in different forms. It may be targeted at different people, but the tactics and the results of it are the same. And so I recognize that, like, yo, if they're going to come at them that way, who's the fucking say that they're not gonna come at us that way? And 9 times out of 10, they probably already came at us at in that way. And so that is part of the reason why I talk about these issues in the ways in which I talk about them, because I want us to understand that, like, as black people, and this is, I really feel like that's the people who are listening to the sound of my voice more often than not. As black people, like, we kind of look foolish sometimes when we just don't acknowledge that there are other people who are dealing with issues that are affecting them negatively. And because these issues don't necessarily affect us, then, you know, we could just kind of like walk away from it. We can just like kind of ignore it. We could just try to act like it's not that big a deal. But if those same people were doing that thing to us, we would be looking at them like, well, what the fuck, bro? What the fuck? You know? And so these are the reasons why I talk about these sorts of issues in the ways in which I do, is because I just kind of want to bring light to these issues. And not only that, man, I want us to stop being made fools of. Because that's ultimately what happens a lot of times, man. We get made fools of quite a bit. And we can be, when you aren't knowledgeable and you're not curious to try to figure out why these issues are a thing, you could become a useful idiot, man. You could be out here, you know, just promoting a talking point, promoting a line of thinking, promoting a discriminatory line of thinking, and, you know, being an ally to something that you probably necessarily wouldn't be an ally with. And that's another thing. Like, you'll have people that you don't agree with 99.9% of the time, but you'll find yourself in agreement with them on something like this, as far as like discriminating against trans people. And now they found common ground. Right. And I want to bring light to, I want to highlight this also. Right. So I was, as I was, you know, trying to do a little bit of my research on this particular topic, I came across this one particular interview, and they had Caitlyn Jenner, right? Caitlyn Jenner is, of course, you know, Caitlyn Jenner. We came to know Caitlyn Jenner as Bruce Jenner, who was I believe, an Olympic decathlete. Like the decathlon is like one of the most grueling Olympic, like events that you can kind of go through. He won a gold medal. I forget exactly what Olympics that was. He won that medal in, but it like very, very like athletically proficient, right? Caitlyn Jenner was back when she was Bruce Jenner. And of course, when Bruce Jenner became Caitlyn Jenner, you know, many of the people who were allies of Caitlyn and were staunch, you know, supporters of her ability to come out as transgender and present as a transgender woman, or what the people that they would call, quote unquote, woke, right? And so I think it's very interesting now that Caitlyn Jenner goes on Fox News, no less, and says that she's getting tired of this woke world. So I'm gonna pull this video up so you guys can kind of watch right along with me. Let me see if I can, let's do this here. Let's stop sharing that one. And I'm gonna pull this video up here so you guys can watch right along with me here. Just give me a second while I pull up this tab. And yeah, here we go. Let's see what Caitlyn Jenner has to say about Leah Thomas and her swimming in the national championships and in the women's national championships.
UPenn swimmer Leah Thomas becoming the first ever transgender athlete to win a Division I national championship.
Was pushed over the first 350 meters. Thomas wins the NCAA championship. Ended up very close for second, with Wyatt taking it ahead of a late charge from Erica Sullivan in third.
The cheers much louder for the runner-up than for Thomas. Thomas' accomplishment only adding to the big question, should she have been allowed to compete in the first place? Let's bring in with us now Caitlyn Jenner, who's got a lot to say on this. Caitlyn, it's great to have you here. Let me just set.
First things first. I want you guys to just recognize recognize the setting here, right? Caitlyn Jenner, by and large, her very existence was something that would normally be decried on a place like a Fox News. Would normally be decried there, like her being able to present as a trans woman, her ability to be able to exist as a trans person, largely in Republican / conservative circles would be laughed at, mocked, decried, and everything else. But keep in mind, Caitlyn Jenner has a certain political bent. Caitlyn Jenner has for the most part of her life, been a conservative white male. Right. And so because Caitlyn Jenner, although she is a transgender woman, Caitlyn Jenner has a certain perspective. And so because Caitlyn Jenner has a certain perspective, and she's, because she leans a certain way, Caitlyn Jenner now becomes useful for a outlet like a Fox. She becomes useful for an outlet like Newsmax. She becomes useful for some place like OAN and things like that. Mostly because they will use someone like a Caitlyn Jenner to blunt criticisms of the fact that, like, most of the legislation that they push, most of the rhetoric that they push is anti-LGBTQ, right? But they can use someone like a Caitlyn Jenner to say, well, no, we're not against gays. We're not against transgender people. We're not against bisexual people. We have a certain different, we have a different philosophical thinking on this. And Caitlyn Jenner kind of blunts the criticism of them being anti-LGBTQ or them being anti-trans. So this is the reasons why they would put a Caitlyn Jenner on a Fox News to have her promote some of these things or promote these perspectives, because here's someone of that community who they can point to and say, hey, look, there's one over there that agrees with us. It's much the same way that they do with black people, right? There's plenty of black people that y'all see talking some shit that, like, normally against what most of the black people are talking about. And you'd be like, man, look at this coon ass nigga over here out here shucking and jiving and shit, right? But, but again, when we start talking about, we comparing the races and, when we start talking about racism and everything else, I'm just trying to let y'all know, like, these things happen in other communities as well. But yeah, there's a reason why Caitlyn Jenner is here. And so, yeah, let me go ahead and let this video continue to play.
This up by saying that Leah Thomas destroyed the field in the 500-yard freestyle. She was 1.75 seconds faster than the runner-up, but she was 9 seconds slower than the record set by Katie Ledecky back in 2017. So she was faster than all the women in the pool last night, but she's not the fastest woman ever. So how do we put this all into perspective?
I think she was probably taking it very easy in the race because she knew the world was watching, and she's just going to go fast enough to be able to win the race.
So she was taking it easy for that race because she's trying to hide the fact that she's a male or born a male or whatever, and she's just, making it so it looks good, right? So why come in last in a very last race? Why come in 5th place in another race? If it's just it is all of that just to make her look a certain way. Why would she not be able, like, she's not even close to the record set by Katie Ledecky. I think they said she was like 7 seconds off of that record. Like, why would she even, like, if she could blow that out, why wouldn't she? Right? But yeah, there's the way in which they try to undercut the fact that, like, she hasn't been blowing away the field in the way in which they would like for her to blow away the field to legitimize the argument that she shouldn't be competed in the first place.
Now, I've said from the beginning, I have no problem with Leah Thomas. Leah Thomas has followed the rules, and she's able to swim because of that. My problem that I have here is with the NCAA, really going all the way up to the Olympic Committee, other organizations that have allowed this to happen. She's playing within the rules. What I've said from the beginning is the rules aren't tough enough. Just being on testosterone depressants for a year or two, whatever the rules are right now, because they keep changing, obviously is not enough. Leah Thomas just dominated in the pool, and
obviously she wasn't, because she finished 5th and 8th in these very same national championships. But the other thing I want to make sure is clear is this. Although Caitlyn Jenner is a transgender woman, although Caitlyn Jenner was a former athlete, Olympian athlete, Caitlyn Jenner did not compete as a woman in any sort of competitions whatsoever. Caitlyn Jenner became Caitlyn Jenner well into becoming a senior citizen. So I don't know if this is the best person. I mean, I guess it's like probably the best person that could probably get to speak to this stuff, but like, man, you have no real experience in this aspect of being a trans person. You just don't. But this is the closest that they can get to someone to talk about this particular issue.
I'm sure she took it quite easily because she didn't want to win by too much. So, yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now. And honestly, I mean, I keep dealing with this stuff all the time. Yeah. I get so criticized. We were talking earlier, just the other day, sometimes you got to stand up. You got to keep your sense of humor. And there was this pink news in the UK, an LGBT publication, and there was this Emily Chuddy who wrote this article really putting me down for my stance on a lot of these things and say I was anti-trans and on and on and on. So, you know, I put out a tweet that that said, well, at least I had the balls to stand up for women and girls in sports. Well, that goes.
So now we've gone from talking about Leah Thomas to Caitlyn Jenner airing out grievances about the way in which her opinion is being received by those who are also of the LGBTQ plus community. So again, like, Caitlyn Jenner has a certain perspective. It's an outlier perspective within that, well, at least what would appear to those of us who are not a part of that community. Caitlyn Jenner has an outsider perspective or an outlier perspective as to what it means to be transgender and to be an athlete and everything else. And Caitlyn Jenner feels like I would imagine that Caitlyn Jenner feels like what like Clarence Thomas, or the frustration that Clarence Thomas may feel when black people aren't necessarily receptive to his ideas about what it means to be black in America, right? Caitlyn Jenner is dealing with what it feels like to be transgender in America and not necessarily keep having the same views as the vast majority, or what would be the vast majority of the people with that of that said community. And so this became a thing where we're no longer talking about Leah Thomas on this particular story. We're talking about the grievances that Caitlyn Jenner has because she's not having her opinion necessarily echoed throughout the transgender community. So she has to come to Fox News. She has to come to these conservative outlets in order to have her voice heard on this particular issue. But I thought it was interesting that they would, of course, they would elevate someone like a Caitlyn Jenner on this particular thing. Now, another thing that I kind of wanted to point to was this, because like I said, this is a subject that has, it has political leanings, man. It has like a lot of, it's political up and down, up and through this thing. And Williams in the chat, he said, Caitlyn equals Candace. Candace who? Owens? Candace Owens, my dude. Yeah, I can see that. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, Candace Owens doesn't necessarily represent, the vast majority of black people in America. Now, Candace Owens has a sizable audience. There's a contingent of black folks who believe like a Candace Owens, who believe like a Thomas Sowell, who believe like a Jason Whitlock, who believe like what's another one? Jesse Lee Peterson. Like, there's a contingent of people who are out here like that. But I also think that there's a lot of them who are out here on the grift, and they know that, like, if they espouse a certain line of thinking, if they have a certain level of politic that they're willing to play in, that they can make money off of that. And Candace Owens is taking that shit to the motherfucking bank. And like, so yeah, there's a grift to be had there. I don't necessarily know if Caitlyn Jenner is of that grift, right? I think Caitlyn Jenner genuinely believes this shit, but I also think that Caitlyn Jenner just wants it both ways, right? Because in this particular interview that I had up here, Caitlyn Jenner said she's so tired of the woke community, when it was the woke community who was allowing Caitlyn Jenner, who actually championed Caitlyn Jenner's ability to exist publicly, when many of the conservative friends and news outlets were deriding Caitlyn Jenner. So like, I think a lot of people within the trans community feel betrayed by Caitlyn Jenner because of how she's stood up politically and supported Donald Trump, despite some of the detrimental policies that Donald Trump enacted while he was president towards the LGBTQ community. As a matter of fact, I think I have another story where Donald Trump repealed a policy of the Obama administration that allowed for transgender athletes, transgender people to just basically go to the bathrooms which they identify with. So let me pull this up as well. Let me go ahead and pull this up. I'm glad you wrote that in, brother. Thank you. So let me do this here. All right, here we go. Yeah. Because Donald Trump reversed this policy. Check this out, you guys.
Those protests happening overnight over the White House's transgender rights decision. We will hear from the inauguration singer Jackie Evancho and her transgender sister in just a moment. But first, ABC's senior White House correspondent Cecilia Vega has the very latest on all of that. Good morning, Cecilia.
Amy, good morning to you. Donald Trump campaigned on being a friend of the gay community, but so many this morning saying that late night move from the White House here sets back protections for transgender people. Overnight, protesters taking their battle cry for transgender rights directly to the White House.
Shame on Trump! Protect the trans students!
Accusing the Trump administration of delivering a major blow.
Trans equality now!
In a late-night decision, the White House reversed guidelines issued under President Obama. Public schools no longer required to allow transgender students to use the bathroom of their choice.
The president's made it clear throughout the campaign that he's a firm believer in states' rights and that certain issues like this are not best dealt with at the federal level.
Top Democrats calling the reversal just plain wrong and saying civil rights are not confusing. Jackie Evancho, who sang at President Trump's inauguration and whose sister is transgender, tweeting, "You gave me the honor to sing at your inauguration. Please give me and my sis the honor to meet with you to talk transgender rights." The issue even pitting two key members of the president's cabinet against each other. Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos saying, "We have a responsibility to protect every student in America. This is not merely a federal mandate, but a moral obligation." While Attorney General Jeff Sessions said the Department of Justice has a duty to enforce the law, adding it remains committed to its protections for all students, including LGBTQ students. Stuck in the middle, students like Gavin Grimm. Born female, his Virginia school district banned him from using the boys' bathroom. His case now headed to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, man. Yeah, so like I said, this kind of this issue kind of just goes back to around 2015, 2016. I remember in North Carolina, there was a bathroom bill that they had down there, an anti-trans bathroom bill, and it cost them I want to say the NCAA tournament and like the NBA All-Star game or some shit like that. I think the All-Star game was supposed to come to Charlotte, North Carolina, and they all pulled that shit out of North Carolina because of that, and it forced the North Carolina legislature to kind of go back on the law. And I think like Charlotte already had like a bill on the books, or a law in like for the city, where they would allow for students to be able to go to the bathrooms with they identify with. And like they had to require North Carolina or Charlotte to repeal that bill or that law before they allowed for them to before something with the North Carolina legislature for them to like repeal the law and all this other shit, right? They tried to make it right on the back end. But the point that I'm making is all of this shit is political. Like the idea that like Leah Thomas shouldn't be competing and everything else, all of this shit is political. And it comes up at a certain point, it comes at certain parts of the year or certain parts in the political cycle, and is rehashed. It becomes a part of the playbook. And if you watch it long enough, you start noticing the patterns and how the plays are being called. Right, you start noticing how the calls are being played. And we got my man Jack is in the chat room. He says she thought she was clever. You talking about Caitlyn Jenner? Yeah, Caitlyn thinks she's clever, but like, yo, man, anybody with any link of sense can like kind of look at that and be like, come on, man, what are you doing, ma'am? What are you doing? What is this here? William Chambers in the chat room. He says the old states' rights excuse to sponsor state bigotry. It's always states' rights when they want to curtail your rights, man. Think about again. When we think about things like voting rights, man, like Republicans would love for it to go back to a states' rights sort of thing, like the Confederacy. The Confederacy was all about states' rights. States' rights, you can't tell us, the federal government can't tell us how to run our lives. We want the governments out of our lives. And I want y'all to I really want y'all to take heed to this, like the both sides of their mouth sort of thing that kind of happens here, right? Republicans, by and large, would love to tell you that they want to get the government out of your life. They say this all the time. Like, we want the government out of our lives. We don't want, high taxes and telling us how to live and enforcing the government on our state. We want to be able to determine how we live in our state. But then they would go back and like start not, as they condemn the federal government and they condemn Democrats for being nanny states and everything else, they would then turn around and say, well, yeah, you shouldn't have access to an abortion because I don't believe in it. And therefore, we're going to come up with a law so that you can't get an abortion. As a matter of fact, we're going to come up with a law so that you can't go to another state and go get an abortion. And if you do get an abortion in another state, somebody can tell on your ass and we'll give them $10,000 so you can't do it, or to deter you from doing it. We'll turn the people into our Gestapo, because everybody can use $10,000. So if your ass going out here to go get you an abortion, guess what? we gonna have somebody tell on your ass, get them $10,000, and now you in trouble, right? You got people you got Republican lawmakers who believe that like a woman shouldn't have access to an abortion, that contraception shouldn't be used during like mating, right? That you shouldn't be able to use contraception, that that a fetus is a person upon conception, but they don't want to extend those sort of rights to, like, say for instance, babies who are born of foreign nationals. So like they call those anchor babies and things like that. They don't want to give that child health care. They don't want to give that child a social security number. They don't even want to extend citizenship to that child. But it's as though like these rights extend to, or this person it's a person until, you can kind of like not use it politically. All of this shit is political. And so like I keep repeating that because I want people to stop falling for the same shit over and over and over and over again, because it's so fucking predictable, right? So that was going on. Like, you had the whole thing with the Trump administration, who claimed to be a friend of the transgender community, was in fact not a friend of the transgender community, and rolled back protections for trans students to go to the bathrooms with a publicly identified. Now, another story about it, another part about this is that like a few years ago, there was a transgender MMA fighter. And this story kind of comes up every now and again. You might have seen it on you might have seen it come down your Facebook timeline a few years ago. Those of you who are, or your friends who are against, transgender athletes competing, mostly like, and here's the other, let's make this clear, is only when it comes to transgender men or transgender women, right? You never hear these stories about, a trans woman or a trans man competing against other men. It's always about, we got to protect the girls. We got to protect our women and children, right? And this is about protecting the girl or protecting the women, right? And so this is why these stories get framed in the way in which they do. But a few years ago, this happened. There was a story about a MMA fighter called her name was Fallon Fox, right? And there were stories about Fallon Fox was a man who transitioned into a woman, and he was they were in MMA fights, and they were brutalizing these women in these MMA matches, and he fractured the skull of a woman in an MMA match. And like, this story was going up and down timelines. I remember seeing it from a few people who were talking about how unfair it is for this man to be in combat sports with these women, and these women are being brutalized in these matches, and it's not fair, and they shouldn't be able to compete and all this other shit, right? We get the story here. This comes from the Bleacher Report. It says, transgender mixed martial artist Fallon Fox has suffered the first loss of her professional MMA career to the relatively unknown Ashley Evans Smith. The loss came via third-round technical knockout in a featherweight title fight during Saturday night's championship Fighting Alliance 12 event. The first round saw Fox attempt to pull guard almost immediately. However, the move failed, and Evans Smith showed off her grappling prowess, nearly securing a choke from the back. Fox escaped and landed some powerful punches and knees that nearly finished the fight, but Evans Smith would survive the round. The tables quickly turned in the second. Evans Smith rocked Fox early and unleashed a flurry of punches and knees from side control, mount, and crucifix positions. There was controversy at the end of the round as the referee motioned that the fight was over, but was unable to hear that the bell had rung just seconds earlier. The third frame was another strong showing from Evans Smith, who escaped an early takedown and reasserted her grappling superiority, out-grappling Fox, mounting her and pounding her out en route to a stoppage victory. Entering the fight, Evans Smith owned a 1-0 professional record and a 5-4 amateur record. The biggest fight of her career came over the Ultimate Fighter contestant Invicta Fighting Club veteran Jasmine Duke. Fox is now 3-1 in her pro career, inadvertently drummed up controversy in 2012 as fans, fighters, and all in the media all questioned the fairness of a male to female transgender competing in bouts against women. Some pointed to Fox's first 4 bouts being stoppage victories as evidence that she owned an unfair advantage over her competition. Now, what I didn't read in that particular story was that there was another fight that Fallon Fox competed in, and Fallon Fox not only got her ass whooped, Fallon Fox got knocked out in 36 goddamn seconds. God damn! Yeah, Fallon Fox got her ass whooped. And so the other part about this that I think kind of goes unsaid is it's funny because this is a Republican talking point. Like, I hear this from like conservatives and Republicans all the time, but it's like the bigotry of low expectations, right? that we have low expectations when it comes to women's ability to compete at high levels. And so when, you know, you hear these stories about how unfair it is for these women to have to compete against these transgender athletes, what gets lost in all of this is that, like, yo, there's some pretty damn badass women who are out here competing at high levels and are actually able to beat these transgender athletes and beat them in a pretty consistent clip. The only times we hear about the transgender athletes are when they actually win something. This is the only time we ever hear anything about them. So the other part about it is this. And I challenge anybody who's listening to the sound of my voice right now. How many of you, without the aid of Google, without the aid of Bing or any search engine that you may like, you know, even, you know, Siri, if Siri's good at this, right? No, seriously. No, I challenge anybody who's listening to the sound of my voice right now. I challenge you to be able to name one high school athlete who's transgender in your state competing on any sport without Googling it. You don't know any. And this is the reason why I think that this is the biggest, most egregious part about this whole thing, is because what we're doing now is, and what's happening now is that you've got people who are trying to drum up all of this animus towards transgender athletes, and they're trying to make it as though like transgender athletes are, or transgender women are trying to take over women's sports and women's competitive athletic events and things like that. They're trying to make this as if it's much larger than it really is. When most people can't name one transgender athlete who's competed at the high school level, who's competed at the collegiate level, can't name one. Right? But now we gotta make sure that we come up with laws against this sort of thing, right? I'll go to this other story here that kind of speaks to this, because there was a law that was percolating in the Utah state legislature, where they were trying to ban transgender athletes from competing in girls' sports. The Republican governor, to his credit, the Republican governor of the state of Utah vetoed that law. And the reason why there was a letter that he wrote, and it popped up on Twitter. And I'm going to read from this letter. It says, there's 75,000 high school kids participating in high school sports in Utah. There are 4 transgender kids playing high school sports in Utah. There is 1 transgender student playing girls' sports. 86% of trans youth report suicidally, and 56% of trans youth have attempted suicide. 4 kids and only 1 of them playing girls' sports. That's what all of this is about. 4 kids who aren't dominating or winning trophies or taking scholarships. 4 kids who are just trying to find some friends and feel like they are part of something. 4 kids trying to get through each day. Rarely has so much fear and anger been directed at so few. I don't understand what they're going through or why they feel the way that they do, but I want them to live. And all the research shows that even a little acceptance and connection can reduce suicidally significantly. For that reason, as much as any other, I have taken this action in the hope that we can continue to work together and find a better way. If a veto override occurs, I hope that we can work to find ways to show these 4 kids that we love them and that they have a place in our state. I recognize the political realities of my decision. Politically, it would be much easier and better for me to simply sign the bill. I have always tried to do that. What I feel was right is the right thing, regardless of the consequences. Sometimes I don't get it right, and I do fault those who disagree, and I don't fault those who disagree with me. But even if you disagree with me, I hope this letter helps you understand the reasons for my decision. Spencer Cox, governor of the state of Utah. Like, yo, man, real talk. You very seldom when you find your man Spann actually like applauding what a Republican politician has to say about anything. But yo, bravo. Bravo fucking oh. You know what I'm saying? Because that's essentially what this means, man. It's like, yo, it's not as if, you know, there's a ton of transgender kids participating in youth sports or collegiate sports. There's not a lot of them. And so like even the whole idea of coming up with a special division, or like we got to separate them from everyone, like who they going to compete against? We talked about this on the on Beer and Chicken. Me and my man Cliff, man, we would go back and forth about this. And I was, you know, I'm a proponent of, you know, allowing these trans, you know, athletes to compete. And my boy, you know, my man's not necessarily there yet. You know what I'm saying? I love him, but he ain't there yet. And this is the thing that I've been saying from the jump. It's like, yo, man, like there's been such a big deal made of these issues, but honestly, it's not as big a problem as folks would like for it to be. And so, when you see people saying, well, I just don't believe that men should be competing against women, it's like, yo, that's not what's happening here. Many of these trans students are going through hormone therapy to suppress their testosterone. They're getting estrogen. They're getting, the estrogen is like, let me stop. Let me stop. I don't know exactly how this shit works. I do not. I'm not going to even pretend that I know how it works. However, there are experts who do know how it works. And these are the recommendations that the experts are saying that should allow for these students to be able to compete on these levels with these people, right? Now, the other part about it is this. There's another part to this. There's always another part to it, right? The other part about it is the idea that there are a ton of dudes, right? That there are a ton of mediocre ass dudes who can't compete against against fellow males on an athletic level, and that these dudes are chomping at the bit to change sexes, to become trans women so that they can compete against women and therefore elevate themselves and become great athletes on the collegiate level and maybe on the pro level, depending on what sport it is. And they can go about it that way. I'm going to tell you this right now. The chances of that being a thing are infinitesimally small. Infinitesimally small. Very few dudes are out here, mediocre ass athletes, and like, you know what, man? Being a woman don't seem that bad. Right? Think about this for a second. Man, being a woman ain't that bad. It's almost as though I want to say it was like Chris Rock who had this joke that was where he said like, yo, man, like he was talking about like a white person trading places. Like, you wouldn't trade places with me and I'm rich, right? That's how good it is to be a white person in America. That even though you could if you could trade places with Chris Rock right now, you wouldn't, because you white in America, and you wouldn't trade places with him because he's rich. Like, it's not a lot of dudes who gonna trade places with being a dude in America and to become a woman. It's just not a thing. That's just not how dudes get down. It's like, yo, why would I do that? Right? The people who are transgender are genuinely transgender, who are genuinely having feelings of them being in a body that doesn't necessarily identify or doesn't match with how they identify as a person. Right? And so it's wild crazy to me. Like, when we start talking about how like this isn't a thing and this shouldn't be allowable and things like that, man. It's just as I've gotten older, man, like, it's weird too, because like there's this adage that people say that like, yo, when you get older you become more conservative in your thinking and things like that. I'm like, nah, I think there's like, if you become more conservative the older you get, like the less you read. Right? I feel like that. Like, if you get more conservative as you get older, it just means you reading less. You're not trying to understand the world around you. You're not trying to understand the things that are happening and why they're happening in the ways in which they do. That's why, like, I fight against myself when I start feeling like, yo, old man Spann coming out, because I know it's some shit that like I'm just not understanding. And maybe it's like, but I try to keep it like to the innocuous shit, like sneakers. You know what I'm saying? Like, not like about how people are choosing to live their lives, not how people are choosing to present themselves to the world. I'm trying to understand people. I'm trying to understand the politics. I'm trying to understand why things are the way that they are. And I take great pride in that, man. I hope that more people would take great pride in like just trying to learn why things are the way that they are, as opposed to just like throwing their hands up and acting as though we don't need to know anything, right? Now, the other part about this, because I said there's always another part. But the other part about this is like, yo, so let's talk about the women who have to compete against the trans athletes, right? So there have been a few different, there have been a few athletes who've come out and they aren't necessarily happy about competing against trans women. Some have, written letters to the NCAA. Some have come out and they've come out with like public statements about their dismay of having to compete against trans athletes. I believe there was a Virginia Tech swimmer who wrote about her coming in like 16th or not making the top 16 because Leah Thomas was a part of the top 16 and she took a place that she would have normally gotten. But the weird part about it is that she said she probably could have swam faster and she probably could have made it, but she feels as though Leah Thomas took a spot that would normally have been reserved for her. It's like, well, if Leah Thomas came in, if Leah Thomas came in number 1, right, and you came in 16th, 17th, is Leah Thomas really the one that took your spot? You know, like, is it Leah Thomas that you should be mad at, or should you be mad at the fact that you just didn't make the cut? And I think it's very interesting that, like, most of the time when we start hearing about the unfairness of it all, it's usually from the people who aren't necessarily that good, or is usually from the people who have lost. And who didn't necessarily have, put forth their best effort at that particular moment in time. It's never from the other people who are like, well, shit, I made the cut. I don't give a fuck about what that bitch talking about. Like, I don't give a fuck what that nigga talking about, man. Like, shit, I made it. Hell, I'm here, But we get this story here. This actually comes out of an outlet I think they call Swimming World Magazine. It says, following the last week's NCAA Women's Championships when Penn swimmer Leah Thomas captured the NCAA title in the 500 freestyle and swam in 2 other championship finals, members of the swimming community continue to issue public statements on the controversial presence of Thomas, a transgender female, at the women's meet. The latest comments come from a group of University of Arizona swimmers that includes longtime head coach and USA Swimming national team director Frank Bush and 2008 Olympian Lacey Niemeyer, plus others from the Wildcats 2008 national championship group. It says the letter sent this week to the NCAA Board of Governors expressed a significant questions of the fairness of Thomas's participating. The letter says that the collegiate governing body has successfully failed everyone by allowing Thomas to compete against cisgender women while trying to appease everyone. The letter states that Thomas catapulted a team to a top 20 program in the country after failing to score a single point last year, although it's worth noting that the Ivy League and Penn canceled all athletics last year and thus had no swimmers in the running to qualify for NCAAs. The letter goes on to contrast Thomas's situation with that of Isaac Hennick, a transgender male who remains eligible for women's competition and swam alongside Thomas at the 100 freestyle final last week. The letter concludes with an offer to help the NCAA in discussing potential steps that can implement to create new solutions for the expanding athletic family. I'm going to just tell you this right now. That just means all they're talking about is, we should give them their own division. But how do you come up with their own division when there's not that many of them to begin with? Right? There's not that many of them to begin with. So again, we go back to what's fair. Do you create a whole segment? Do you create a whole division when you don't have the infrastructure, you don't have the apparatus in place in order to do so? You don't even have enough people to kind of validate the reason for its existence. By and large, usually the people who are the loudest are the people who are losing. Very seldom do you hear from the people who are winning against these folks complaining about the situation because they're just out there competing. Usually the losers who are, man, this some bullshit, man. This ain't fair, bro. Kind of like me with the sneakers, right? Right? So yeah, man. As I see people talking about this issue, man, I just want us to understand and recognize that by and large, man, a lot of the rhetoric around whether Leah Thomas is swimming or not, whether or not it's fair for Leah Thomas to compete at that level and with the level of competition that they're competing against. I want us to be aware of how our politics are being used. I want us to be aware of how our sentiments are being weaponized against us, right? Because here's the thing, and this is how it gets down to the brass tacks for me. We just had a racial reckoning in America after the death of George Floyd and, Breonna Taylor. And as black people in America, we talked about how unfair it is that that police kind of, you know, get away with killing us with reckless abandon in America, right? Like we've had enough of this shit. And one of the ways in which to undercut the ways in which you argue for equal rights in America is to get some of the people who are arguing for equal rights to also be like, well, the discrimination against them is all right, but you need to leave us the fuck alone, right? And ultimately, that's what happens when it comes to how Republicans push this sort of shit forward, is that they will use, like, well, shit, we got some black people who are cool with this. You know, we even got other transgenders. We got Caitlyn Jenner we can kind of hold up on this. We can get this legislation through. We can discriminate against these people. And then while we doing that, we can also, like, let's slide this motherfucking anti-abortion bill in. Hey, let's slide this anti-CRT shit in. Like, even the CRT shit was manufactured. It was made up. A fellow by the name of Christopher Rufo decided that, like, yo, we can, like, tie any of this shit that's attached to, like, learning black history or learning history in America, and if it doesn't coincide with the things in which we consider traditional American history, we can coin that shit CRT, critical race theory, and we can, like, ban all of this shit. Now think about the fights that are happening all over America for the ability for your child to learn about basic American history, right? Again, we go back to Republicans who were talking about, you know, like cancel culture and things like that. Like, Republicans are out here canceling books. They out here trying to ban books and shit. So when you become complicit in one part of the discrimination against another group because it's not necessarily happening to you, guess what's happening? That same level of discrimination is happening against you, just in different ways. You're just complicit in this other shit. And I want us to stop being complicit in the other shit. I want us to stop falling for the fucking banana in the tailpipe, because they're using our inability, or not our inability, because nobody's not fucking able. Everybody's got a goddamn smartphone. Everybody's got a fucking, some level of, the people who are listening to the sound of my voice right now, you got access to a computer, you got access to a smartphone, you got access to a tablet, you got access to information. You have no excuse to not know these things. It's just your ability, or better yet, your desire to learn what these things mean, what they could do, or how they could affect your life and those around you. You have the ability to learn this shit. It's just your desire of whether or not you really want to. So they've essentially weaponized our ignorance against us and against others, right? And just in much the same way that they will weaponize someone else, like a white person who doesn't necessarily understand that, like, the shit that they're calling CRT isn't CRT, but they'll go to a school board meeting. They'll go to a school board meeting and they'll say, "Hey, we got to get this CRT out of the schools," despite the fact that the schools ain't been teaching that shit to begin with. It's a college level course, right? But they've been able to weaponize those people against shit that your kids could stand to benefit from. And now your kids aren't learning the shit that they're supposed to learn from, right? They're not learning the things that they should know. And so I want us to stop, take a beat, realize, recognize, and analyze why these things are happening and why they're happening now. That's what I want us to do. Just take a beat. And if you watch, you can recognize the patterns. I've been doing this podcast shit for a decade. I follow media and shit. I've been doing this for a long time now. This playbook is fucking predictable. I've seen it coming, like you can see it coming a mile away, and how they talk about it and how they frame it and how often they talk about it and how often it's showing up in your algorithms, on your televisions. This is all framed up. It's trying to get up. It's trying to get a certain level of, it's trying to get a certain kind of people fired up. Now, I know when it comes to black people in America, like, this isn't the type of thing that, like, really moves us to go vote Republican, right? But at the same time, when these particular issues come up, especially if it comes up on your on the ballot as a ballot initiative, oftentimes Republicans are getting what they want, because you like, it's unfair for a boy to be competing against a girl, when that's not necessarily what's happening. But because you've been fed all of these stories over the course of the last year and a half, now that's what you're thinking, that you're thinking this is what's going on. You haven't heard about the story of Leah Thomas coming in 8th place at the damn national championships. You haven't heard the story of Leah Thomas coming in 5th place at the national championships. You haven't heard of the story about Fallon Fox being knocked out in 36 seconds. You haven't heard the story about Fallon Fox being submitted and quitting in the 3rd round of an MMA fight. You haven't heard these things because those things aren't what gets you to vote a certain way. That's why you haven't heard those things. And by and large, a lot of us just aren't motherfucking curious enough to even look it up. There's not. That's the reality of the situation, right? We got another statement here in the chat room here from William Chambers. It says, your statement about the mediocre males is spot on. The world record pace for women's marathon, 26.2 miles, is 2 hours and 19 seconds. It's a little over 5 minutes per mile. Most male marathon runners wouldn't be able to compete with the top women marathon runners. The fact that a world-class athlete can still perform that level after the transition is amazing. Yeah, man. Like, just let's keep it a buck. Most dudes just ain't trying to become a woman so that they can compete in athletics. They're just not. So that's the other, like, I want people to think rationally about this, man. Like, think about the average dude. Think about the average dude that you know, right? Think about the average dude that you know. He's like, yo, man, you know, my career would take off if I was just a woman, right? Now juxtapose that, like, say for instance, we talking about basketball, right? We got a dude who probably he was a decent college basketball player, you know, marginally good. Like, chances are he won't get drafted into the NBA, but he's got a chance to like have some sort of a career overseas. You know, maybe he goes to play in Greece, or maybe he plays in Italy or something like that. You know, a lot of guys who are good in college basketball never make it to the NBA, might make it to the G League. They just never were like NBA material, but they go out and they have decent careers overseas, right? Now those dudes, you think those dudes would like, you know what, when they get to college, you like, you know, if I just go ahead and transition to be a woman, I could be the #1 pick in the WNBA. And when I get to the WNBA, guess what? I'm going to make $250,000 and still have to go overseas and play because they're not paying me enough over here. I got to go over to Russia to go play basketball because they're not paying me enough in America. Like, why isn't any dudes who's going to like subject themselves to that when they see how women are being treated in athletics here in America? Why would they do that? The math ain't fucking math, and people, is not. You got folks out here who would by and large be like, yo, man, the WNBA, you know, just they don't get the support from people because it just ain't good. It ain't a good game, this, that, and the other. And the women got to go play basketball overseas so they can actually make a decent living playing professional basketball, right? But at the same time, like, oh man, we got to get Brittany Griner back home. We got to make sure that Brittany gets home safe and all this other shit. Like, well, nigga, like, you could have been contributing to that by like supporting the WNBA instead of talking shit about it. There was no reason. There should be no reason why Brittany Griner should be over at in Russia playing basketball to, like, you know, get a decent level of compensation for the amount of skill and talent that she has as a basketball player. And if you believe that, you know, it's a travesty that Brittany Griner is over there, okay, cool. Keep it consistent. But also, if you recognize that there's a discrepancy between the level of compensation that women are having when it comes to their ability to compete and make a living playing basketball, what makes you think that any man who knows like, I could be marginal, I can be marginal and still make more money than some of the greatest women basketball players on the planet? I could just be like, you know, like a decent dude and still make more than her. The math ain't mathing, people. And I want us to stop falling for the bullshit. I want us to stop falling for the banana and tailpipe. And so, yeah, man, that's all I'm going to talk about tonight, man. I feel as though too many people are just falling for the bullshit. And I'm tired of like people I know that I love and respect also being part of the people who are falling for the bullshit. I really am. Like, I love y'all. I do. Is why I talk to y'all the way in which I talk to y'all, man. It's all love. I really do hate when I'm having conversations with people that are normally like, that are by and large relatively reasonable folk. And then they get like these issues come up and I can tell they haven't thought about it. They haven't read about it, but they formed an opinion about it, and mostly that opinion falls in line with the rhetoric and the propaganda that has been fed to them. And so, yeah, man, I just hope that, you know, with this deep dive, we can kind of like dispel some of the shit that's going on around this whole thing about women swim. But the other part about it, I just thought it was funny, man. It was like, man, you got a bunch of niggas, man, talking about, you know, how unfair it is for Leah Thomas to compete against women. It's like, yo, you niggas don't go to the pool. Like, you got niggas who never get into the pool at the pool party. Talk about how unfair it is that Leah Thomas is out here swimming. Like, suddenly, you care about women swimming. Right? So, yeah, man, I'm going to get on up out of here after that, man. That's been the show. But, of course, like I said, before we get up out of here, I got to remind y'all how to get in touch with your man Spann here at the Spann Report Podcast. Let your voice be heard, man. Go ahead and hit up that hotline at area code 313-288-0485. That's area code 313-288-0485. Leave me those voicemail messages. Those messages will get replied to here live on the show. Replayed here on the show, replied to in kind. You can also email us here at feedback at speed. Damn it, Spann. You can email us here at feedback@thespannreport.com. As feedback@thespannreport.com. Go ahead, leave us those emails, and of course those emails will get replied to here live on the show as well. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram. My name on both of those platforms is Mr._Spann. So go ahead, follow me there, chop it up with your man Spann throughout the week. Also, hit us up on our website at www.thespannreport.com. You can go there, watch replays of the show. You can donate to the show as often as you like, as much as you like. And of course, we really do appreciate every dime over here at the Spann Report Podcast Network. Shout out to our Patreon patrons for allowing us to broadcast this show here live on Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter. We really appreciate our golden circle here at the Spann Report Podcast Network. Also, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes and or Stitcher Radio. Those 5-star reviews are the ones that get read here live on the show. It doesn't cost you a dime, just a couple minutes of your time to let everybody know why you're rocking with us over here at the Spann Report Podcast Network, man. Real talk. I am about to get on up out of here. I will talk to you guys again soon. But until next time, fam, peace.